Hello everyone, welcome to Thyros Web Development Tips and Tutorials. I'm here with another video today with an exciting topic. We will be making this web page come to life by adding some subtle animation when it loads and on scrolling. So we will turn this into this. And the best part? We will not be using any libraries like JS or animate on scroll. Instead, we will make this very lightweight using Alpine JS and some custom CSS. This video is sponsored by Showcase, a professional network built for people who code to connect, build community, and find new opportunities. Hang out with like minded individuals, share your knowledge, and build your own community. You can share blogs, videos, projects, code snippets, and short messages. If you're a content creator, you can grow your own audience and make some money through paid subscribers. Join me and thousands of developers on Showcase today. Let's get started now. When you do it right, CSS animations are very attractive. But animating elements on scroll, that is, when they come into the viewport, needs some JavaScript. There are quite a few libraries out there that make it very easy to add these animations without much knowledge of JavaScript, but then you have to pay the price of performance because they are quite heavy. Which is why I will show you how to implement these on your own with Alpine JS in simple few steps. Even if you have no knowledge of Alpine JS, I assure you, you can follow this video. Now this page here is built using Tailwind CSS because I prefer it. You can use pure CSS also. Here's a GitHub repository for the web page without animations, that is the one I just showed you. We will be using this as the starting point. This link is in the description below. So you can also clone it and follow along the video. So let's copy this. Let me open item. Let me clone the repository, git clone, paste the link, and let me call this animate on scroll. We have this, so let's cd into animate on scroll and open this in Visual Studio Code. So here is our starter project. Let me just walk you through of all the folders here. Now this is our public folder where we have these images. You have the logo and the other illustrations ready. And this is our index.html, the only HTML page that we need. And we have the style sheet styles.css that we are building using Tailwind CSS. So if you're not using Tailwind CSS, don't worry about any of this folder structure. I have installed Tailwind here along with CSS Nano, Post CSS CLI, and Auto Prefixer. And then because I have installed Tailwind through Post CSS, and tailwind.css is our custom CSS file where we have added some wrapper and some button components needed for the web page. This is our configuration file. I have used some custom colors. I have used this color from the extended color palette and I have defined my own color here. And here you can see we are using the JIT mode and we have mentioned the path inside purge because this is required for just-in-time compiler. Great. So now let's get started into adding some animations. As I mentioned, we will be doing this using Alpine JS, right? So let's first go and grab that CDN link of Alpine JS. alpinejs.dev is the website. You can go to the docs and installation. Yes, with the latest version, you can also install it using npm, but just to keep it simple, I will go ahead with using the CDN. So let me copy this and paste it here. So we're using the latest version 3.2.3 as of recording this video. Now let me first tell you how we're going to make this work. Even if you have the slightest knowledge of CSS animations, you might know that with pure CSS, we can animate something maybe on hover or something like that. But to animate when the element comes into the viewport or when the web page loads, that's not possible with pure CSS. You will need some JavaScript. So there is something called as the intersection observer API. So you can Google that and you'll find that in the MDN docs. Now, this intersection observer API helps us to check when the element comes into the viewport and then we can trigger the animation. But this is quite complicated. We are not going to go into this because I myself don't understand this. You don't even need to understand this because Alpine JS offers a very nice plugin called Intersect. Okay, so if you read this, Alpine's Intersect plugin is a convenience wrapper for this intersection observer. There is a very simple demo here, which is what we're going to do. Scroll down and then now this is in the viewport, right? That's the animation we are wanting to do. Let's take a look at this code and see what's happening. We have this X data, which is the state that is nothing but a set of variables to begin with. So here initially it says shown is false. So whatever is this element that we need to animate, initially it's false. And then X intersect, that is whenever this div comes into the viewport, change that to true. And here this is simple. It just uses X shown. So when shown is true, this is shown. When it's false, it's not shown. So that's what happens, right? It's first false, so it's hidden, and the moment this comes into the view, this changes to true, so it uses a transition and comes into the view. We will be following a slightly different approach because if you observe, this is actually what is needed to display this div, but we'll have to use an additional parent element for every single element that we wish to animate, and that's not really doable for a large set of elements, right? So let's see how to approach this. I will show you. Now, to use intersect plugin, you can again either install it via npm or use the cdn again. So this is the cdn link of the plugin, and we have to add it before alpine.js core.js file. So let's do that. It has to go before. Please note that, otherwise it will not work. Now to start with, I will simply add a blank X data to body that is required. Otherwise, Alpine.js will not initialize. And here, let's try and add some animation to this first heading, the H1, right? But before we make any changes to the tailwind styles, I will have to do npm run build. That's when it'll start watching the files and building Tailwind CSS automatically using the JIT compiler. So now you can see that Tailwind CSS is watching for changes. So we can add any styles now, and Tailwind CSS will automatically build the styles for us, right? So first, let me add an opacity 0 to this heading. And then when it comes into the viewport, let's change the opacity to 100. So first, let's see if we are able to see this heading or not. Yeah, so the heading is missing. It's there obviously, but we cannot see it because the opacity is 0. That's what we want. And just to test the intersect functionality, let's add x intersect equals, and here what we'll do is we will add the class opacity 100 to this element. To access this element, you can use this magic property in Alpine.js, $el. So now to this element, we want to add a class, right? To do that, we can say el.classlist.add. That's pure JavaScript. And here we will add opacity 100, which is the tailwind utility class for opacity 100. So now if this works, we should be able to see the heading because it's in viewport, right? Now you'll not be seeing any animation here because we didn't add a transition. That's simple again. We can do a simple duration 1000 and actually see this work. Okay, so you see this is fading in right now, right? Okay, so in case you want to also move it along with fading, maybe you want to move it upwards. For that, let's first add a translate y full. So it translates in the y direction, that is in the vertical direction, full height. And here we will say translate y0, right? So that brings it back into the correct position. Okay. So now if you load it, you see that's the simplest way you can bring in a fade in up animation. That is, it fades in plus moves up from bottom. Okay, but there is one problem here. If you want to start with let's say not opacity 0, but if you want to start with opacity 50 or something, this will not work. You see this here, if you inspect element, and you will notice that opacity 1 doesn't work, opacity 0.5 works. This, the whatever we did before, it was opacity 0, that's why it worked. So we cannot use this method. This was just for demo to show you how simple it is to use Tailwind CSS and Alpine to do a single animation on bringing it into the viewport, but this will not work for all sorts of animations. So what we will do is remove this for now and remove all of this as well, just the class names, and instead we will be using keyframes. If you don't know much about keyframes, don't worry, we'll go and do a very simple one to start with. Let's open our custom CSS file, that is tailwind.css, and scroll down towards the end. Let's add a layer utilities. I hope this can be added under utilities, doesn't matter much. So the first keyframe that we'll create is the fade in up, which we just actually used it. Keyframes, let's call it fade in up, that is, it fades in and moves up. Now in keyframes, you simply define the steps the animation needs to take. That is, the animation goes from one state to another, and at what points what styles need to be applied is what the keyframe defines. So it always starts at 0% and ends at 100%. So at 0, in between also you can add other transitions. So at 0%, let's say opacity is 0, and then we'd like to use the transform translate y. Here we're using pure CSS, not Tailwind CSS, because I don't think you can use Tailwind classes within keyframes. So translate y, we will say 100%, and then at 100% of the animation, we want the opacity back at 1, and then translate y to 0. Okay, and now we have to actually use this in the animation. So let's call that, let's give it a class fade in up itself. You can call it something else if you don't want to confuse these two, but I think that's okay. So, oh sorry, so this should also come within the utilities layer. So fade in up, and here I will say animation, and you have to mention the name, duration, and the timing function. So name of this is fade in up, duration is 1000, milliseconds, or I think you could do 1 second. And none of this is important for now. We'll add the timing later. All right, so that's it. That's all you actually have to do. Yes, sometimes you will have to use a WebKit prefix also, something like this, WebKit keyframes along with just keyframes to support some other browsers. But since we are using auto prefixer here, sorry, since we're using auto prefixer to build Tailwind CSS, it will do the heavy lifting for us. So that will add all the required prefixes. I will also show you when the styles.css gets generated. So now let's go back, and here let's add this class fade in up. Right, so for some reason this has stopped, so I'll do npm run build again. Right, so now let's see how this works. Open with live server. You see, this just worked. Let me refresh again. Yeah, and this works. If I somehow feel 100% is a little too much, it's loading, I mean it's starting from here. I'd like to change that to maybe 50% and see how that works. Yeah, so that's slightly better. Now you can add the same animation to the paragraph and the button as well. So just go back, copy this X intersect into the paragraph and into the button. So now you see, this is exactly what we saw at the beginning, right? This is the endpoint we wish to achieve. Now what about this illustration? Fade and up might not be the best animation. Of course, you can experiment your own stuff, but I feel scaling from maybe 50% to 100% might look good. So let's do that now. I will add another keyframe. I will actually copy this and paste it here, and I'll change this to scale. Opacity 0 and 100 could be same, and instead of translate Y, I will say scale, and here maybe scale 0.5 and then scale 1. Alright, and here again the name is, animation name is scale, and this class we can apply it here to that image. So copy this and X intersect and the class scale. Wow, isn't that beautiful? Now let's do the same to this image and the text as well. Again, let's follow the same thing, scale for the image and fade in up for the text. So copy this again, add it to the image, and then copy the fade in up line, add it to the H2, first paragraph, and the second paragraph. Yeah, let's try from the beginning, refresh, yes, and then when you scroll down, this is what we need, right? If you want to try some different animations, you can totally go ahead. There are a lot of animation generators online where you can test out the animations and then copy code from there. One of them is animista.net. Yeah, this is the one. So you can try here, you can try, there are so many of these animations. What we might need is the entrances, so instead of basic ones, go to entrances, and the one we just tried right now is yeah, the slide in from bottom. Okay, so this is what we did, just the distance is different. Now you can try out whatever you want, slide in from top left, or let's say bounce in, fade in, puff in. You can try multiple things, just try not to overdo it because it looks cool to you but it might annoy the users, so try to keep it as subtle as possible. let's say you decide to do a slit in, no, yeah, maybe a swirl in, and then you can just click on the code symbol here and you can copy all of these. We don't need auto prefixer, like I said, but if you're using pure CSS and you're not using any post CSS, then you will have to add this prefix. So check on it if you need it. Otherwise, you can uncheck this, you can copy this class, and you can copy this keyframes. Of course, make sure that you keep this comments intact, because you'll need the license to use this. So that's about it. Yes, of course, we could abstract this further, and instead of adding this JavaScript line in every single place, you can instead use a function, and you can call that function passing in the name of the animation. But that's beyond the scope of this video. I only wanted to show you how simple it is. Usually it's best to add these animations to just a couple of elements in the page, to wherever you want to draw the attention to, but this is how you could do it. That's what I wanted to show you. But before we conclude, I told you I'll show you the styles.css generated, right, to check whether the WebKit prefix has been added or not. So let's take a look at styles.css, scroll down completely to the bottom, and there you go. You see, this is what we wrote, and this is what has been generated along with this, because that's what is required with the WebKit prefix, and it's also been added here wherever is required. You don't have to worry about whether it's required here or not, because auto prefixer really takes care of it, right? So that was one thing. One last thing is about accessibility. So this is not something you should ignore. There are some people who might prefer reduced animation. That is, they might have a disability where they're troubled by the animation. So there is a media query that you can use, which is prefers reduced motion. Let's just Google it. Prefers reduced motion. Yeah, here is the documentation. Now this is the media feature which is used to detect if the user has requested that the system minimize the amount of non-essential motion it uses. So none of these animations are really essential as such. It's just to attract the users. So we definitely don't want to trouble them. So in case they have the setting that they don't want much animation, then you can use this media query here. So let's just copy this and let's add that here. So in case the user has set this, then we want the fade in up and the scale animations to be none. Okay. I'm not testing this right now, but I'm just letting you know that you need to add this to make sure of accessibility. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Do share it ahead if you liked it. If you think something could have been done better, please do let me know in the comments, because this is the first time I'm trying this out. It worked. I felt like sharing. I'm sharing it. I'm definitely going to use it in my future projects. Thank you for watching. Hit a like and share this video ahead. If you enjoyed watching this, don't forget to subscribe below and turn on the notifications so you won't miss a single video from Tyrus.